A 4-year-old homeless girl tries to stop a millionaire from jumping off a bridge after losing his family in a car accident. But he pulls her arm. And moments later, something happens that shocks everyone. Comment giving a rating from 0 to 10 for my story. Your opinion is very important. And subscribe to my channel to support my work. I count on your help. Chapter 1. The frigid, pre-dawn air of the sprawling metropolis sliced like a razor through the slumbering skyscrapers, casting eerie shadows that danced between the dark alleys. A 4-year-old girl, but appearing no older than 2 due to her extreme frailty, walked barefoot through the deserted streets. Her small, bruised feet left almost imperceptible traces on the cold asphalt as she clutched a torn plastic bag to her chest, containing the only possession she owned in the world. Her large, dark eyes scanned every dumpster, every hidden corner, every scrap of food she could find to ease the hunger that had gnawed at her stomach for days. The child had learned to be as silent as a ghost, moving through the shadows of the city without being noticed by the few stragglers still out at that hour. Her tattered clothing, several sizes too large for her skinny frame, hung like a broken doll's dress. On the other side of the metropolis, high above in one of the most imposing buildings in the financial district, a 30-year-old man gazed at the urban landscape through the windows of the top floor. His matinee idol looks and movie star bearing contrasted sharply with the devastated expression etched on his face. The widowed millionaire had amassed a fortune investing in Wall Street stocks, building a financial empire that included everything from gold holdings to cryptocurrency investments that yielded millions of dollars. His hands trembled as he held a silver-framed photograph, showing a beautiful woman smiling beside a 4-year-old boy with golden hair. Exactly 1 week ago, his perfect life had shattered into twisted metal and shattered glass on a dark highway. The accident that took his wife and son had left a void so deep in his chest that not all his wealth could fill it. The businessman slipped the photo into the inside pocket of his designer coat and walked to the private elevator. His footsteps echoed through the empty corridor of the company he had inherited from his father, a construction firm that erected luxury buildings throughout the city. Even with his net worth estimated at hundreds of millions, even with investment funds that grew automatically while he slept, the man felt poorer than any beggar on the streets. As the elevator descended silently, the girl in the street had found the remains of a sandwich in a dumpster near a closed diner. Her small fingers trembled not only from the cold, but from genuine gratitude for that crumb of luck. She hid behind a lamppost to eat in peace, savoring every bit as if it were a royal banquet. The millionaire left the building and walked through the empty streets, heading instinctively towards the main bridge that crossed the city's river. His companies, his investments, his multi-million-dollar deals, none of that mattered anymore. The pain in his chest had become unbearable, a weight that grew with every breath, every heartbeat that reminded him that he was still alive while his family was not. The child finished her makeshift meal and began to walk again through the streets, following an instinct she could not understand. Her small steps led her in the same direction as the rich man, as if an invisible force pulled them towards the same destination. She carried within her an ancient wisdom, acquired through suffering and the need to survive in a world that seemed to have forgotten she existed. When the businessman arrived at the bridge, the cold morning wind lashed his face, bringing tears that he could no longer contain. He rested his hands on the concrete railing and looked at the dark waters that flowed many feet below. In his tormented mind, those waters represented the end of a pain that had become greater than his ability to bear. The girl saw him from afar, a solitary figure silhouetted against the night sky. Something in his posture, in the way his shoulders trembled, touched a sensitive chord in the child's heart. She had seen that same expression of despair on the faces of other homeless people, people who had lost all hope. Moved by a compassion that defied her own miserable condition, She began to walk towards the bridge. The rich man leaned forward, his fingers gripping the railing so tightly that his knuckles turned white. All his money, all his fortune, all his possessions could not buy back what he most wanted. One more day with his family, a hug, one last conversation. The assets he managed seemed like a cruel joke of fate, infinite material wealth, but absolute emotional poverty. Chapter 2. The girl approached the bridge with cautious steps, her bare feet making as little noise as possible on the cold concrete. She watched the elegant man leaning dangerously over the railing, and something inside her childish self recognized a familiar pain, the same she had felt so many times when hunger or cold seemed unbearable. With courage that defied her small stature, she came closer, stopping a few feet away from him. "Mister," she whispered in her fragile voice, breaking the silence of the early morning, "are you sad?" The widowed millionaire startled, turning to see where that voice came from. His eyes met the child's tiny figure, and for a moment he thought he was hallucinating. The girl looked like an ethereal apparition, her disheveled hair dancing in the wind and her big eyes shining under the faint light of the bridge's lamps. "You shouldn't be here," he mumbled, his voice hoarse with contained emotion. "It's dangerous for a child." The girl took a few more steps, getting even closer. She had learned in the streets to read people's expressions, to identify when someone was at the end of their rope. "I know what it's like to be sad," she said simply, her childlike wisdom shining through the words. "Sometimes, when I get very sad, I think about the birds flying in the sky. They fly to beautiful places." The businessman felt something break inside his chest. This child, clearly left to her own devices, was trying to console him. The irony of the situation hit him like a slap in the face. He, with all his wealth and assets in stocks, being comforted by someone who didn't even have shoes on their feet. "What's your name?" he asked, moving slightly away from the railing. The girl hesitated for a moment. It had been so long since someone had asked her name that she had almost forgotten what it was like to be treated like a real person. "People call me Dirty Girl," she replied with an honesty that made his heart ache. "But my mother gave me a beautiful name." The millionaire knelt down to be at her level, noticing for the first time how small and fragile she was. His investments in international funds, his investments that generated astronomical profits, all his accumulated fortune, none of that had prepared him for that moment of pure humanity that a street child was offering him. "Where's your mother?" he asked gently. The girl's eyes filled with tears, but she held them back with a strength that impressed the man. "She's gone. Said she'd be back, but that was a long time ago." The child wiped her nose with the sleeve of her torn blouse. "I wait for her in the same place every day, but she doesn't come." The businessman felt a strange connection form between them. Both had lost important people. Both carried a pain that seemed bigger than themselves. The difference was that he had infinite resources to deal with his tragedy, while she only had her own inner strength. "Are you hungry?" he asked, noticing how her clothes hung loosely on her skinny frame. The girl nodded shyly. "I'm always hungry. But I've learned not to think about it during the day." The millionaire reached out his hand to her, a gesture that surprised even himself. "Do you want to come with me? I can give you real food." She looked at his outstretched hand, then at his face. There was something in the man's eyes that reassured her, a sadness that mirrored her own, but also a gentleness that she rarely found. Slowly, she placed her small, cold hand in his. At that moment, a strong gust of wind swept across the bridge, causing the man to lose his balance slightly. Instinctively, he grabbed the railing with his free hand, but the force of the wind caused him to lean dangerously forward. The girl, still holding his hand, was pulled along. "No," she cried, using all her small strength to try to pull him back. But her weight was insufficient against the force of gravity and the wind. For a few terrifying seconds, both were suspended in a dangerous dance between life and death. The businessman desperately tried to stabilize himself, but the combination of wind, imbalance, and the girl's weight pulled them inexorably forward. He quickly thought about letting go of her hand to save her, but something inside him refused to abandon that child who had risked herself to help him. With a superhuman effort, he managed to throw himself back, pulling the girl with him. Both fell heavily to the ground on the bridge, breathing heavily. The millionaire looked at the child in his arms, who was trembling not only from the cold, but from the shock they had just experienced. "Are you okay?" he asked, checking to see if she had hurt herself. The girl nodded, but continued to shake. "The man almost flew like the birds," she said, her small voice reflecting the trauma of the moment. The businessman hugged her instinctively, feeling how light and fragile she was. At that moment, a strange clarity invaded him. That child had risked her own life to save him, even though she was the one who most needed saving. Her courage had awakened something within him that money couldn't buy, a purpose beyond his own pain. "Let's get out of here," he said, getting up and extending his hand again. "It's very cold, and you need a safe place." As they walked across the bridge towards the safe side, the millionaire looked back once, seeing the place where he had almost made an irreversible decision. His company, his business, his cryptocurrency investments, all of that would continue to exist, but now he had a different reason to continue. Beside him, a 4-year-old child who looked like she was 2 had changed the course of his life with a simple act of compassion. Chapter 3. The road to the widowed millionaire's mansion wound through an affluent area on the outskirts of the metropolis, where imposing houses hid behind high walls and meticulously manicured gardens. The girl had never been to that part of the city, and her wide eyes absorbed every detail of the landscape that contrasted sharply with the dirty and dangerous streets where she had learned to survive. The luxurious car glided silently down the wide avenues, and she shrank into the soft leather seat, still not believing that this was real. "Is this where you live?" she whispered, as the electronic gates opened, revealing a property that seemed straight out of a fairy tale. The 3-story mansion stood majestically, with its white marble columns and huge windows that reflected the first light of dawn. Ornamental gardens stretched out on all sides, with bubbling fountains and artistic sculptures that were worth more money than many people saw in their entire lives. The businessman nodded, watching her reaction with a mixture of melancholy and curiosity. His fortune had been built over years of smart investments and hard work, managing assets that included everything from real estate fund investments to gold reserves that guaranteed financial stability for several generations. However, all that wealth had never seemed as empty as it did at that moment, when an abandoned child looked at his house with the same wonder he felt when he saw his family together. When they got out of the car, the main door of the mansion opened, revealing a woman in her 60s, with grey hair pulled back in a tight bun and a stern expression marked by decades of dedicated service. The family's housekeeper had worked for 3 generations of the business dynasty, and her loyalty was unwavering, even in the most adverse circumstances. She observed the scene with piercing eyes, immediately noticing the presence of the ragged child next to her boss. "Sir," she said in a controlled voice, but clearly surprised, "you didn't say you'd be bringing company." The millionaire firmly held the girl's hand, who instinctively hid behind him from the housekeeper's intimidating gaze. "This is our new guest," he explained with a firmness that admitted no questions. "She will be staying with us indefinitely. Prepare the guest room on the 2nd floor." The housekeeper raised an eyebrow, clearly disapproving of the decision. During her 30 years of service to the family, she had witnessed many eccentricities, but bringing a street child into the house, where the family had built precious memories, seemed to her a desecration of the purity of the grieving home. "Sir, perhaps it would be prudent to consider the implications of this decision. The house still holds the memory of—" "That's exactly why," he interrupted, his voice laden with an emotion that made the housekeeper recoil. "This house needs life again." The girl watched the tense exchange between the adults, her instincts sharpened by life on the streets, correctly interpreting the housekeeper's disguised hostility. She had encountered that kind of look many times. People who saw her as a problem, an annoyance that stained the established order of their organized lives. She squeezed the millionaire's hand tighter, who felt her discomfort and bent down to be at her level. "You don't have to be afraid," he said softly. "This is your home now." In the days that followed, the adaptation was a delicate process full of surprising discoveries. The girl moved through the mansion like a curious little ghost, touching precious objects with a reverence that touched the millionaire's heart. She had never seen a giant screen television, never slept in a bed with Egyptian silk sheets, never bathed in a marble bathtub with endless hot water. Each new experience was greeted with a respectful silence that deeply intrigued the businessman. During the first breakfast, served in the main hall overlooking the gardens, the girl remained completely quiet, watching the millionaire's gestures to learn how to behave in that refined environment. When he cut a slice of French bread and spread jam, she imitated each movement with impressive precision. Her ability to absorb and reproduce details was extraordinary, as if her mind functioned like a photographic camera, capturing every nuance of appropriate behavior. The housekeeper watched these interactions with a mixture of reluctant curiosity and persistent disapproval. She had tried to argue with the boss about the impropriety of the situation, claiming that a child of unknown origin could pose risks to the family's safety and reputation. However, as the days passed, she began to notice disturbing aspects in the child that defied her initial prejudices. The girl never asked for anything, never complained, never cried, never threw tantrums as would be expected of a 4-year-old child. She ate everything she was offered with a silent gratitude that made the housekeeper remember her own difficult childhood during wartime. Even more impressive was her evident intelligence. She quickly learned where everything belonged, never broke or soiled anything, and demonstrated a respect for objects that suggested a premature maturity forged by suffering. The millionaire found himself spending more time at home than he had in recent years, often cancelling important business meetings to watch the girl carefully explore every corner of the mansion. He saw her standing in front of the family portraits in the main hallway, studying the photographs with an intensity that moved him deeply. When she finally spoke about the images, her words were like daggers in his wounded heart. "The boy in the picture looks like me when I was little," she said, pointing to the photograph of his lost son. "He had a family who loved him." During the second week of living together, something extraordinary began to happen. The girl discovered the businessman's private library, a sumptuous room with floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with valuable books and first editions. Although she couldn't read, she spent hours sitting on the floor, carefully leafing through the pages and creating her own stories from the illustrations she found. The millionaire found her one day drawing on the margins of an old notebook, creating detailed images that left him breathless. The girl's drawings were extraordinary, not for the technique, she was, after all, just a child, but for the richness of detail and the almost photographic accuracy with which she reproduced places and people. She had drawn the bridge where they met with frightening precision, including architectural details that someone her age shouldn't be able to capture. Even more disturbing, she had created perfect portraits of people she claimed to have seen on the streets, faces marked by sadness and despair that seemed to leap off the page. "How can you draw like that?" he asked, genuinely impressed. The girl shrugged, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I remember everything I see," she said simply. "My head is like a box where I keep things." Meanwhile, at the construction company he had inherited from his father, problems were beginning to arise in a worrying way. The main partner, an ambitious man who had taken advantage of the millionaire's period of mourning to take on more operational responsibilities, was beginning to make questionable decisions without consulting the true owner. Important contracts were being signed with dubious suppliers. Risky investments were being made without due analysis, and rumors about financial irregularities were beginning to circulate in the company's hallways. The assets that the businessman had accumulated so carefully over the years were being threatened by someone he had placed complete trust in. Chapter 4. The third month of living together brought subtle but significant changes in the dynamics of the mansion. The girl had developed a silent routine that impressed even the most reluctant housekeeper. She always woke up before dawn, meticulously made her bed, and sat by the second-floor window to watch the gardens awaken with the sunlight. Her presence had brought a different energy to the grieving house, not a boisterous joy, but a contemplative peace that the widowed millionaire hadn't experienced in months. During this period, he began to notice disturbing aspects in the girl's drawings that left him deeply unsettled. She had created a series of detailed illustrations showing specific places in the city that she claimed never to have visited, including the interior of his private office at the company headquarters. The drawings were so accurate that they included personal objects in their exact positions, documents scattered on the desk as he had left them, even the specific view from his office window on the 40th floor. "How do you know this place?" he asked one morning, showing her the drawing of his office as they had coffee in the mansion's sunroom. The girl stopped chewing her toast and looked at the paper with a thoughtful expression. "Sometimes I see places in dreams," she replied after a long silence. "But I don't know if they're real dreams or if they're things I've seen before." The answer disturbed him more than it reassured him. How could a child who had spent her life on the streets dream of such specific details of an environment she had never accessed? He carefully kept the drawing, along with the others he had begun to collect, forming a bizarre archive of illustrations that defied any logical explanation. That same week, the housekeeper made a discovery that would completely change her perception of the mysterious girl. While washing the few clothes that the child possessed when she arrived at the mansion, she found small objects secretly sewn into the lining of a torn blouse. They were items of seemingly insignificant value: an old coin, a pearl button, a small gold pendant, and, most surprisingly of all, a simple wedding band that made her heart stop for a moment. With trembling hands, she examined the ring more closely and discovered a delicate engraving on the inside, two intertwined initials that she immediately recognized. It was the wedding band of the millionaire's deceased wife, a unique piece that had been created especially for her by a renowned jeweler. The housekeeper had personally overseen the selection and creation of that jewel years ago, when the couple was still experiencing the first moments of marital bliss. How had that ring ended up in the hands of a street child? The piece had been lost in the accident that claimed the family, along with other personal belongings that were never recovered by first responders. The housekeeper rushed to her boss's office, where he was working on complex financial reports, trying to understand the growing irregularities in his business. "Mr. Beaumont," she said with a changed voice, extending the ring with reverence, "I found this among the girl's belongings." The millionaire took the ring with fingers that trembled visibly. The cold metal against his skin awakened an avalanche of painful memories. The day he had placed that ring on his beloved's finger, the whispered promises, the shared dreams that had been brutally interrupted. He looked at the housekeeper with eyes full of questions he couldn't formulate. "How did she get this?" he finally murmured. The housekeeper shook her head, equally perplexed. "I have no idea, sir, but if she had this ring, it means she was at the scene of the accident," he completed, a terrible realization forming in his mind. "Or she knows someone who was there." That afternoon, while the girl played silently in the gardens, watching the birds that came to drink water at the main fountain, the millionaire approached her carefully. He knew he needed to ask delicate questions, but he didn't want to scare her or break the fragile trust they had built over the months. "Can I show you something?" he asked, sitting on the grass beside her. The girl nodded, always willing to pay attention when he spoke. The businessman showed her the ring, carefully observing her reaction. For a moment, her face remained neutral, but then her eyes filled with tears that she tried to contain. "Where did you get this?" he asked gently. "Found it on the street," she replied in a small voice. "It was shining under some pieces of broken glass. I thought it was pretty, so I kept it." "Do you remember where exactly?" The girl closed her eyes tightly, as if she was trying to access painful memories. "It was a place with a lot of noise, a lot of flashing lights. There were broken cars and people crying." She opened her eyes and looked directly at him. "Do you know the lady who wore this ring?" The simple question hit him like a punch to the stomach. "It belonged to my wife," he replied with a choked voice. "She passed away a few months ago." "Was she pretty?" asked the girl, gently touching the ring with her small fingers. "Very pretty, and she had a good heart, like yours." During the following days, the millionaire couldn't stop thinking about the revelation. If the girl had been at the scene of the accident, it meant that she had witnessed the tragedy that had destroyed his life. The possibility tormented him. A 4-year-old child had witnessed something so traumatic and kept that secret for all these months, carrying alone the weight of terrible memories. Meanwhile, at the company, the financial situation was deteriorating rapidly. The main partner had assumed almost total control of operations, claiming that the millionaire was emotionally incapable of making rational decisions after the loss of his family. $1 million contracts were being cancelled, stock investments were being liquidated without authorization, and funds that guaranteed the financial stability of the company were being redirected to dubious projects. The businessman discovered these irregularities during a routine review of the financial reports, when he noticed alarming discrepancies in the numbers. His cryptocurrency investments had been partially liquidated. His gold reserves were being used as collateral for questionable loans, and the company's net worth had decreased dramatically in just 3 months. "We need to talk," he said to the partner during a tense meeting in the boardroom. "There are serious irregularities in the financial reports." The partner, a 40-year-old man with a trustworthy appearance but calculating eyes, smiled with a tranquility that deeply irritated the millionaire. "They are just necessary adjustments to keep the company competitive during your absence," he explained with false cordiality. "You have been distracted with personal matters." "Distracted?" repeated the businessman, feeling the anger grow in his chest. "My family was destroyed a few months ago. Of course, I've been dealing with personal matters. That's exactly why we contracted that I would assume more operational responsibilities," continued the partner with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Someone needed to keep the business running while you recovered." That night, upon returning home, the millionaire found the girl drawing once again in the library. This time, she had created a disturbing illustration that made him stop abruptly at the door. The drawing showed a man in a suit pushing papers towards another man who was crying behind a large table. The details were too accurate to be a coincidence. It was clearly a representation of his meeting with the partner, including specific elements of the boardroom that she had never seen. "Where did you see this?" he asked, his voice laden with an urgency that scared the girl. She looked at the drawing as if she was seeing it for the first time. "I don't know," she replied honestly. "Sometimes the images appear in my head, and I need to draw them so they stop bothering me." Chapter 5. The family's private doctor arrived at the mansion on a rainy autumn afternoon, bringing with him an aura of professional seriousness that contrasted with the progressively more welcoming environment that the house had become. The millionaire had requested a thorough examination of the girl, concerned not only with her evident physical health, but also with the unexplainable phenomena she demonstrated through her disturbingly accurate drawings. The doctor was an experienced man who had cared for 3 generations of the family, and his discretion was as valuable as his medical competence. During the examination, which lasted more than 2 hours, the doctor made discoveries that completely changed the understanding of the mysterious child. In addition to chronic malnutrition and the evident signs of prolonged neglect, he identified a rare condition that explained both her fragile appearance and her extraordinary abilities. The girl suffered from a syndrome that affected her physical growth, making her appear to be 2 years old when she was actually 4. But that was also associated with exceptional cognitive abilities, including a virtually perfect photographic memory. "It's an extremely rare condition," explained the doctor to the businessman in private after the examination. "It affects perhaps 1 child in every 100,000 births. Physical growth is compromised, but mental capacities are amplified in an extraordinary way. She literally manages to remember everything she sees, with details that border on the impossible." The revelation brought relief and concern in equal measure. On the one hand, it explained the impossible drawings and the frightening accuracy with which she reproduced places she claimed never to have visited. On the other hand, it meant that a child with extraordinary mental capacities had witnessed terrible things during her life on the streets, and all those memories were perfectly preserved in her mind. "Does she need special care?" asked Beaumont, watching through the office window as the girl played in the gardens, apparently oblivious to the medical discoveries about her condition. "Mainly adequate intellectual stimulation and a lot of patience," replied the doctor. "Children with this syndrome often develop anxiety due to the overload of information they can process. She probably sees and remembers details that go unnoticed to us." That same week, the situation at the company reached a critical point when external auditors discovered financial irregularities that could no longer be ignored or justified. Millions in investments had been redirected without authorization. Investments in international funds had been liquidated to cover dubious operations, and important contracts had been cancelled in favor of partnerships that benefited only the corrupt partner. The final confrontation took place at a tense meeting of the board of directors, where Beaumont presented irrefutable evidence of the cheating that had been happening during his emotional absence. The partner, realizing that his actions had been discovered, abandoned any pretense of innocence and revealed a bitterness that he had kept hidden for years. "Did you really think I would stay in your shadow forever?" he said with a cruel smile. "For years I worked to build this company while you reaped all the profits and dividends. It was time to equalize the situation." "We worked together," replied Beaumont, trying to maintain his composure in the face of the evident betrayal. "We built this wealth as partners." "Partners?" laughed the partner bitterly. "I was a glorified employee while you inherited everything from your father. You were born with a silver spoon in your mouth, while I had to fight for every crumb of recognition." The revelation of the motivation behind the betrayals was devastating. The millionaire realized that he had been naive to completely trust someone who had harbored deep resentments for years, waiting only for the right opportunity to act. His personal tragedy had provided the perfect distraction for years of vengeful planning to be put into practice. Meanwhile, at the mansion, the girl had begun to show signs of increasing anxiety. Her drawings became darker, portraying scenes of conflict and tension that seemed to echo the problems Beaumont was facing in his business. The housekeeper, who had gradually developed a protective affection for the child, noticed that she woke up frequently during the night, muttering incomprehensible words about bad people and dark places. One morning, the girl created a drawing that made the businessman's blood run cold. The illustration showed 2 men fighting in an office, But this time she had included details that no one but him could know. The specific scar that the partner had on his right hand, the result of an accident in his youth, and even the exact expression of hatred that he had seen on the man's face during the most recent confrontation. "How do you know about this?" he asked, showing the drawing to the girl during lunch. She looked at the illustration with a confused expression, as if she was seeing it for the first time. "I dreamed about men fighting," she said simply. "The bad man was saying bad things about you." The girl's ability to access information that she shouldn't know began to torment Beaumont. It was as if her extraordinary mind managed to capture fragments of conversations and situations that happened far from her physical presence, processing this information in ways that defied any logical explanation. During this turbulent period, a new concern arose when a social worker appeared at the mansion, claiming to have received anonymous complaints about a child being kept irregularly on the property. The woman was rigid and inflexible, representing a bureaucracy that did not tolerate situations that deviated from established protocols. "Sir, I need to verify the conditions in which this child is living," she said, entering the mansion with an authority that deeply irritated the businessman. "We have received information that a minor is residing here without the proper legal procedures." "She is under my care," replied Beaumont, trying to remain calm. "She is receiving adequate food, medical care, and a safe environment." "That is not enough," replied the social worker, examining the mansion with critical eyes. "There are protocols that must be followed. The child needs to be evaluated by our team, and her legal situation needs to be regularized immediately." The threat of losing the girl added an extra layer of stress to the businessman's already troubled life. He began to realize that saving the child from the streets had been only the first step of a much more complex journey. Now he needed to legally fight for the right to care for her, face inflexible bureaucracies, and prove that he could offer a suitable home for a child with special needs. During one of the social worker's visits, the girl demonstrated her extraordinary intelligence in a way that impressed even the most skeptical employee. When questioned about her previous life, she provided accurate details about specific places in the city, names of people she had met on the streets, and even exact descriptions of events that had happened in different neighborhoods during specific periods. "This child possesses a remarkable memory," commented the social worker, surprised by the accuracy of the information provided. "It is rare to find someone so young with such detailed retention capacity." "She is special," agreed Beaumont, watching with pride as the girl answered the questions with a maturity that contrasted with her fragile appearance. However, during one of the questioning sessions, the girl made a revelation that completely changed the course of the investigation. When questioned about how she had ended up on the streets, she casually mentioned having seen the black car that hit the other cars on the night she lost her mother. The social worker paused her notation and looked directly at the child. "You saw a car accident?" The girl nodded, her big eyes reflecting painful memories. "The black car was going very fast and hit the pretty car. Then there was a lot of fire and people screaming." She looked at Beaumont with a sad expression. "It was the car of the family that lived in the big house." The silence that followed was deafening. The businessman felt the world spin around him as he processed the implication of the girl's words. She had not only found the ring at the scene of the accident, she had witnessed the entire tragedy that had destroyed his family. Chapter 6. The revelation that the girl had witnessed the accident that claimed his family left Beaumont in a state of shock for days. He walked through the mansion like a ghost, trying to process the cruel impossibility of fate that had intertwined their lives in such a dramatic way. The child he had saved on the bridge was the same one who had witnessed the most traumatic moment of his existence, carrying alone the weight of terrible memories that she couldn't fully understand. During the subsequent sessions with the social worker, more disturbing details emerged from the girl's photographic memory. She was able to describe with chilling accuracy not only the accident itself, but also the moments that preceded it. She had observed the black car following the family's vehicle for several blocks, noticed the strange way the driver was driving, and even captured fragments of a phone conversation that he had moments before the collision. "The man in the black car was talking on the phone," she reported in her childish voice, but laden with a seriousness that made the adults present shudder. "He said he was going to do something, and then he was going to get a lot of money. He talked about a boss who was going to be happy." The social worker and Beaumont exchanged meaningful glances. What initially seemed to be a tragic accident was beginning to take on the contours of something much more sinister. The possibility that the tragedy that had destroyed his family had been planned was so devastating that the businessman needed to lean against the wall to avoid falling. "Do you remember anything else about the man?" asked the social worker gently, recognizing the crucial importance of that information. The girl closed her eyes tightly, accessing her extraordinary memory. "He had a mark on his hand," she said finally. "An ugly mark, like he had hurt himself a long time ago." Beaumont's heart stopped for a moment. The description corresponded exactly to the scar that his treacherous partner had on his right hand, the result of an accident that he had mentioned casually years ago. The connection between the business betrayal and the personal tragedy began to form in his mind like a macabre puzzle whose pieces finally fit together. In the following weeks, while discreet investigations were conducted based on the girl's testimony, life at the mansion became an emotional tug-of-war between the need to protect the child and the urgency to discover the whole truth about the tragedy. The businessman hired private investigators who confirmed his worst fears. The driver who caused the accident had been paid by someone close to the family, someone who knew perfectly the routine and schedules of his wife and son. The girl, unconsciously central to this entire investigation, continued to create drawings that provided valuable clues about events that her mind had recorded, but that she didn't completely understand. One of her illustrations showed a meeting between two men in a dark parking garage, with one of them handing an envelope to the other. The details were so accurate that the investigators were able to identify the exact location where the meeting had taken place. During this turbulent period, the housekeeper became an unexpected ally in protecting the girl. Her initial hostility had transformed into a fierce maternal affection, especially after she realized how the child had brought renewed purpose to her boss's life. The elderly woman began to teach small domestic skills to the girl, who absorbed each lesson with her extraordinary learning ability. "She's like a little flower that's been trampled but keeps trying to grow," commented the housekeeper one afternoon as she watched the girl care for a small garden they had created especially for her. "She has an inner strength that many adults don't possess." The girl's garden became her special refuge, a place where she could process her complex memories and find peace among the plants that grew under her dedicated care. She had developed a special connection with the flowers, talking to them as if they were understanding friends who could keep her secrets. Beaumont frequently observed her during these silent conversations, impressed with the emotional maturity she demonstrated despite her tender age. The legal situation related to the girl's custody became complicated when distant relatives of the businessman began to question his decisions. Uncles and cousins who rarely communicated with him emerged from the shadows, claiming concern for his mental stability after the tragedy, and suggesting that caring for a street child was evidence of a psychological breakdown. "You're not thinking clearly," said his eldest aunt during an unannounced visit to the mansion. "This obsession with a strange child isn't healthy. You should be focusing on rebuilding your life, maybe finding a new wife suitable for your social status." "She's not an obsession," replied Beaumont, with a firmness that surprised even himself. "She's part of my family now." "Family?" repeated the aunt with evident disdain. "A girl of unknown origin that you found on the streets." That's not family, that's misguided charity. During one of these tense family discussions, the girl demonstrated an understanding of the situation that made all the adults present uncomfortable. She entered the room where the conversation was taking place, and, in her small but determined voice, said, "I know you don't like me because I'm different. But he saved me when I was lost, and now I want to help him too." The simplicity and honesty of the statement completely silenced the critical relatives. The girl continued, addressing Beaumont directly. "I remember bad things that happened, and maybe those memories can help you find out why your family is gone." It was at that moment that the businessman made a decision that would change the course of the entire investigation. He decided that it was time to directly confront his treacherous partner with the evidence they had collected, using the girl's unique testimony to expose the whole truth about the tragedy that had destroyed his life. The preparation for this confrontation involved weeks of careful planning. Attorneys specializing in corporate crimes were consulted. Private investigators provided detailed documentation about the financial irregularities, and experts in child psychology were brought in to ensure that the girl's testimony was treated with the appropriate sensitivity for her age and special condition. During this period, Beaumont watched with growing admiration how the girl dealt with the pressure of the situation. Despite her fragile appearance and tender age, she demonstrated a courage that inspired him daily. When asked if she was afraid to talk about the bad things she had seen, she replied with a wisdom that deeply touched his heart. "I'm not afraid anymore, because now I know you'll protect me, just like I tried to protect you on the bridge." The emotional connection between them had deepened beyond any initial expectation. What had begun as an impulsive gesture of compassion had transformed into a genuine father-daughter relationship, forged through shared tragedy and mutual hope. The girl had found the stability and love she had never known, while the businessman had discovered a renewed purpose that transcended his personal pain. On the eve of the final confrontation with his corrupt partner, Beaumont found the girl in the garden, caring for her favorite flowers as the sun set behind the distant mountains. She looked at him with her big, wise eyes and said something that perfectly summed up the extraordinary journey they had shared. "Before, I was lost in the darkness, but now I have a family that keeps me in the light." Chapter 7. The day of the confrontation dawned with a violent storm that lashed the metropolis as if the sky itself sensed the tension that was about to explode. Beaumont put on his best suit, not out of vanity, but as a psychological armor for the battle he would face. His investments in stocks, his carefully built assets, all his accumulated fortune over years of hard work, all this had been threatened by someone in whom he had placed absolute trust. The girl watched his preparations from the office door, her big eyes reflecting an understanding that went beyond her apparent age. She had created a special drawing the night before, an illustration that showed two men in a large room, but this time the good man was standing while the bad man was sitting, a symbolic inversion that demonstrated her expectation that justice would finally prevail. "Are you going to be okay?" she asked in her small voice, approaching him with cautious steps. The businessman knelt down to be at her level, gently touching her face with hands that trembled slightly. "I'm going to be okay because I have you to come home to," he replied with a sincerity that made the girl's eyes shine. "I'm going to be here drawing pretty flowers while you're gone," she promised. "And when you come back, we'll take care of the garden together." The meeting was scheduled to take place in the company's main boardroom, an environment that Beaumont knew intimately but that now seemed strange and hostile. When he arrived, he found his partner already present, accompanied by expensive lawyers who had clearly been hired with money diverted from the company's coffers. The arrogance on the man's face was evident, as if he still believed that he would get away with his crimes. "I hope this meeting is productive," said the partner with a fake smile, gesturing for everyone to sit around the mahogany table that was worth more than many houses. There's a lot to discuss about the future of the company. Indeed there is, agreed Beaumont, placing a thick folder on the table. Especially about the millions that were diverted during my absence. The partner's expression changed subtly, but he maintained his composure. I don't know what you're talking about. All investments and applications were made with the best interest of the company in mind. Best interest, repeated the businessman, opening the folder to reveal detailed documents, photographs, and financial reports. Unauthorized redirection of funds, liquidation of gold investments without consultation, cancellation of profitable contracts to benefit shell corporations. This is treason, not administration. For the next hour, evidence after evidence was presented, building an irrefutable case of systematic corruption. The partner tried to justify each irregularity, but his explanations became progressively weaker and more contradictory. His lawyers whispered constantly in his ears, clearly realizing that the situation was deteriorating rapidly. It was then that Beaumont introduced the most devastating evidence of all, the girl's testimony about the accident. When he mentioned that he possessed information from an eyewitness about the tragedy that had claimed his family, the partner's face paled visibly. An eyewitness? He asked, trying to keep his voice stable. After all these months? That's impossible. A child with a photographic memory who saw everything, explained the businessman, carefully observing each reaction. She remembers details that only someone who was there could know, including phone conversations about payments and satisfied bosses. The silence that followed was tense and charged with electricity. The partner looked at his lawyers, then back at Beaumont, his mind clearly calculating options that were becoming increasingly limited. The web of lies and betrayals he had built over years was collapsing around him like a house of cards. You have no proof, he said finally, but his voice lacked its previous confidence. The testimony of a street child isn't worth anything in court. Perhaps not, agreed Beaumont calmly. But when combined with forensic evidence, phone records, suspicious bank transactions, and the history of financial irregularities you left behind, well, the picture becomes quite clear. It was at this moment that the partner made the mistake that would definitively reveal his guilt. In a moment of uncontrolled rage, he slammed his fist on the table and shouted, "That damn girl shouldn't even be alive. She had no business wandering those streets that night." The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone in the room immediately realized the implication of the words. How could he know that the girl was on the streets on the night of the accident, unless he knew exactly when and where the accident would happen? Realizing his mistake, the partner tried to recover, but it was too late. I meant, it's terrible that a child witnessed something so traumatic. No, interrupted Beaumont, his voice laden with a controlled fury that made everyone in the room shudder. You said she shouldn't be alive, as if you knew she was in danger that night. From that moment on, all pretense of innocence was abandoned. Under increasing pressure and realizing that his options had run out, the partner finally began to reveal the truth behind his elaborate revenge. The story that emerged was one of decades of accumulated resentment, corrosive envy, and a meticulously developed plan to destroy the life of the man he saw as responsible for all his frustrations. You really want to know the truth, he said with a bitter smile. You were never the true owner of this company. You never deserved all that wealth, all that heritage that fell into your lap, just because you were born with the right last name. What are you talking about? Asked Beaumont, a sense of foreboding growing in his chest. I'm your brother, revealed the partner with cruel satisfaction. Half-brother, to be precise. Bastard son of your father with a secretary he kept for years. While you grew up in the mansion, I grew up in a small apartment, watching my mother work 2 jobs to support us. The revelation hit the businessman like a physical blow. He tried to process the information, searching his memories for any clue about the existence of a secret brother. His father had been a reserved and authoritarian man, capable of keeping important secrets even from his own family. "Why did you never say anything?" he murmured, still in shock. "Because my plan was much better," replied the half-brother with evil satisfaction. "To work alongside you, gain your trust, learn about your business and investments, to then take everything that should have been mine by right. And when your perfect family became an obstacle to my plans, well, accidents happen." The explicit confession of the murder of his family made Beaumont's blood boil with rage. For months, he had lived with the guilt of having survived while his wife and son died. Now, he discovered that their lives had been deliberately taken by greed and envy from someone who should have been family. "You killed my wife and my son for money," he said, his voice low but charged with an intensity that made everyone in the room cringe. "I killed for justice," corrected the half-brother with disturbing coldness. "For decades of humiliation, for an inheritance that was denied to me, for a life that should have been mine." At that moment, as the complete truth of the betrayal was revealed, Beaumont thought of the girl who was at home, tending her garden and waiting for his return. She had survived to witness the truth, had found the courage to help him discover justice, and now represented not only his emotional salvation, but also the key to ensuring that justice was finally done. Chapter 8. The weeks that followed the devastating revelation were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, criminal investigations, and corporate reorganization. The half-brother had been preventively arrested, facing charges that included premeditated murder, business fraud, and misappropriation of millions in assets. His expensive lawyers, paid with stolen money, tried to build a defense based on claims of mental instability and childhood trauma, but the evidence against him was overwhelming and irrefutable. During this chaotic period, the girl became the silent center that kept Beaumont's life anchored in reality. She continued her daily rituals in the garden, drawing colorful flowers that contrasted drastically with the dark memories she had helped to unearth. Her presence in the mansion had become not only comforting, but essential to the businessman's emotional sanity, who found peace only in the moments they spent together. The housekeeper observed this dynamic with a mixture of admiration and growing concern. She had witnessed 3 generations of the family facing various crises, but she had never seen a situation where a child so young carried so much emotional weight on her shoulders. The girl rarely spoke about her traumatic memories, but her drawings revealed deep layers of psychological processing that impressed even the experts who had been consulted. "She's stronger than any adult I've ever known," commented the housekeeper one afternoon, as she watched the girl patiently teach an injured bird to eat from her hands. "But I worry about what she's keeping inside herself." Beaumont shared that concern. He had hired the best child psychologists in the city to monitor the girl's emotional development, ensuring that she had all the support she needed to properly process the traumas she had witnessed. However, she demonstrated a resilience that defied all professional expectations. During a session with the specialized psychologist, the girl created a drawing that revealed aspects of her personal history that no one had previously suspected. The illustration showed a young woman working at a desk full of papers, surrounded by numbers and documents, while a small child played silently in a nearby corner. The details were so accurate that they included specific logos and office layouts that seemed familiar to Beaumont. "Do you remember this woman?" asked the psychologist gently, studying the drawing with professional interest. "That was my mother," replied the girl with devastating simplicity. "She worked with numbers and was worried because the numbers didn't add up." Beaumont felt a chill of recognition. The description and the details of the drawing corresponded exactly to the accounting office of his company, an environment that few people had access to. The possibility that the girl's mother had worked for him, perhaps even discovered the irregularities that his half-brother was perpetrating, began to form in his mind as an even more disturbing revelation. Subsequent investigations confirmed his worst fears. The girl's mother had been a temporary accountant hired discreetly by the finance department to audit discrepancies that had been detected in the company's books. She had worked for several weeks, discovering evidence of systematic fraud that dated back to years of careful manipulation of the records. She had compiled a detailed report on the irregularities, explained the chief financial officer during a tense meeting to review the findings. But before she could present her findings, she simply disappeared. We assumed that she had abandoned the job for personal reasons. The truth was much more sinister. The girl's mother had discovered the corruption scheme that could have exposed the half-brother years before he managed to cause greater damage. When she refused to accept bribes to silence her findings, she was threatened in a way that forced her to flee with her daughter, living in hiding until the stress and fear caused a nervous breakdown that led her to be admitted to a psychiatric clinic. "My mother got very scared," explained the girl when confronted gently with this information. "Bad men came to our house and said things that made her cry. She said we had to hide to be safe." The revelation that the child had been on the streets because her mother was trying to protect her from retaliation related to the discoveries about his own company added an extra layer of guilt and responsibility that Beaumont carried. If he had paid more attention to the signs of problems in his business, if he had been less confident in the integrity of his partner, perhaps he could have avoided so much suffering. During this period of painful discoveries, a new threat emerged from an unexpected direction. Distant relatives of the imprisoned half-brother began to appear, claiming rights over parts of the company and questioning the legitimacy of the accusations against him. Some of these relatives had connections with dangerous people, individuals who would not hesitate to use physical intimidation to protect their financial interests. The security of the mansion was reinforced when veiled threats began to arrive through anonymous phone calls and messages left at the gates of the property. Beaumont realized that exposing the truth about the corruption had created enemies who would go beyond legality to protect their secrets and illicit profits. "Maybe we should consider temporarily moving to a safer location," suggested the head of security during a meeting to assess the threats. "There are people who might try to use the child as a way to pressure you to drop the charges." The possibility that the girl could be kidnapped or hurt because of her courage in witnessing the truth terrified Beaumont. He'd promised to protect her, but now he realized his own pursuit of justice might put her in even greater danger than she'd faced on the streets. It was during one of those tense nights, as armed guards discreetly patrolled the mansion's grounds, that the girl once again demonstrated her extraordinary wisdom. She found Mr. Beaumont in the study, reviewing security measures and contingency plans, and approached him with a drawing she'd created especially for that moment. The drawing showed a large house surrounded by bad people outside, but inside the house was a family united and protected by a bright light. In the center of the illustration, a little girl held the hands of a tall man, both smiling despite the shadows around them. "I'm not scared," she said, handing him the drawing, "'cause now I know that no matter how many bad people are out there, inside our house we'll always be together and safe." The simplicity and courage of her words deeply touched the millionaire. In that moment, he realized that the girl had not only survived terrible traumas, but had found enough strength to help others face their own fears. She had become his emotional anchor, his source of hope, in a world that seemed determined to destroy everything he valued. "You're right, Maisie," he responded, embracing her with infinite gratitude. "No matter what happens out there, our family will remain strong. That night, as life's storm continued to rage around the mansion, the millionaire and the girl found peace in the certainty that they had found in each other not only protection, but a genuine connection that transcended the traumatic circumstances that had brought them together. The journey to justice was far from over, but they would face the remaining challenges together as the true family they had chosen to become. Chapter 9. 6 months after the arrest of his half-brother, an unexpected discovery completely changed the course of the entire situation. During a routine investigation into the criminal's confiscated assets, investigators found documents hidden in a secret vault that revealed the true extent of his corruption network. Among the papers were detailed records about the whereabouts of the girl's mother, information that had been deliberately concealed to keep the child isolated and vulnerable. The woman had not abandoned her daughter by choice, as everyone had presumed. She was in a specialized psychiatric clinic on the outskirts of the city, suffering from a severe nervous breakdown caused by the constant threats she had received after discovering the fraud scheme. The half-brother had used his connections to ensure that she remained medicated and isolated, preventing any attempt to reunite with her daughter or reveal the information she possessed. "She's alive," said the lead investigator during a tense meeting in Mr. Beaumont's office. "And according to doctors, her mental state has improved significantly in recent months. They believe she may be ready for controlled visits." The news hit the millionaire like an emotional hurricane. For all these months, he had assumed he was the only responsible adult in the girl's life, who had genuinely become his daughter at heart. The possibility that her biological mother might claim her back stirred deep fears about loss and abandonment that he thought he had overcome. The girl, with her extraordinary ability to perceive emotional tensions, immediately noticed the change in his behavior. During dinner that night, she placed her small hand on his and asked in her soft voice, "Are you worried about something, Neil?" How to explain to a 4-year-old that the mother she thought she had lost forever was alive, but that this could mean the end of the family they had built together? The millionaire struggled to find suitable words for a situation that defied any parenting manual. "Remember when you told me about your mom?" he began carefully. "The woman who worked with numbers and was worried." The girl's big eyes lit up with a mixture of hope and fear. "I remember her. She sang to me before bed and drew stars on my bedroom ceiling. Well, we found out that she didn't leave because she wanted to. She got sick and needed to go to a place where special people could take care of her until she got better." The information took several minutes to be processed by the child's extraordinary mind. When she finally spoke, her words demonstrated an emotional maturity that continued to surprise everyone around her. "Does that mean she can come back to me?" "Maybe," the millionaire replied honestly. "But if that happens, you need to know that you will always be my daughter too. Nothing can change the love we have for each other." During the following weeks, careful preparations were made for the first meeting between mother and daughter after almost 2 years of separation. Psychologists specializing in family reunification were consulted, security protocols were established, and a neutral environment was prepared to minimize potential trauma for both parties. The clinic where the girl's mother was staying was a serene place on the outskirts of the metropolis, surrounded by therapeutic gardens and designed to promote emotional healing. When Mr. Beaumont arrived with Maisie for the scheduled visit, he held her small hand firmly, both to offer support and to seek strength to face a situation that could change their lives forever. The woman waiting for them in the visiting room was a frail and aged version of the vibrant person who had worked in his office years ago. Her hair had prematurely grayed. Her face was marked by months of anxiety and medication, but her eyes retained the intelligence and kindness that had impressed the millionaire when she had discovered the financial irregularities. The moment of reunion was silent and charged with complex emotions. The girl observed the woman with cautious curiosity, her childhood memories struggling to recognize someone who had changed so much during her absence. The mother, in turn, covered her mouth with her hands upon seeing how her daughter had grown and changed during the months of separation. "My little one," the woman whispered with a choked voice, reaching out her arms hesitantly. "How you've grown." The girl looked at the millionaire, seeking encouragement, before taking her first timid steps towards the woman who had been her first family. The hug that followed was tentative but genuine, two people trying to rebuild a connection that had been brutally interrupted by circumstances beyond their control. During the visit, which lasted 2 hours under careful supervision, the girl's mother revealed disturbing details about the months leading up to her hospitalization. She had been constantly watched and threatened by thugs of the half-brother, forced to live in temporary hiding places and constantly changing address to protect her daughter. The constant stress and the impossibility of providing stability for the child had eventually caused the mental breakdown that led to hospitalization. "I never wanted to abandon her," she explained through tears, holding her daughter's small hands. "But they said they would hurt you if I didn't disappear. I thought staying away was the only way to keep you safe." The girl listened to the explanation with the seriousness that characterized her personality, processing information that helped fill gaps in her fragmented memories. When her mother finished speaking, she asked a question that demonstrated her intuitive understanding of the complex situation. "Are you better now? Don't you need to hide anymore?" "I'm getting better every day," the mother replied. "And now that the bad people have been arrested, I don't have to be afraid anymore." During the drive back to the mansion, the girl remained thoughtful, clearly processing the conflicting emotions that the reunion had awakened. The millionaire respected her silence, understanding that she needed time to integrate the reality of having two families who loved her in different ways. "She looks sad," the girl commented finally, when they were already close to home. "Like you were when your family was gone." The observation deeply touched the millionaire's heart. The child's ability to recognize and understand emotional pain in other people continued to impress everyone who knew her. "She was sad because she was forced to stay away from you," he explained. "But now that you've reunited, she can start to be happy again." "And can I keep living with you?" she asked with a vulnerability that made his heart ache. "Forever, if you want," he promised. "Your mum and I will talk about how we can all be a bigger family." In the following weeks, a new type of routine began to establish itself. The girl visited her mother twice a week at the clinic, always accompanied by the millionaire, who gradually developed respect and affection for the courageous woman who had risked everything to expose the corruption in his company. The visits became longer and more relaxed, with the mother sharing memories of when the girl was younger and creating new memories through simple activities such as drawing together and talking about flowers. During one of these visits, the girl's mother made a revelation that completely surprised the millionaire. She had carefully preserved, during all the months of persecution and hiding, a complete copy of her report on financial irregularities, including evidence that not even the official investigators had discovered. "I kept everything in a safe place," she explained, showing a small key that she always kept with her. "I knew that one day it would be necessary to prove the truth about what happened." The document revealed that the corruption scheme was even more extensive than anyone had imagined, involving not only the diversion of funds from the company, but also a complex network of bribes and blackmail that had operated in the city for more than a decade. The additional evidence would ensure that the half-brother faced even more severe sentences and that other accomplices were identified and prosecuted. Chapter 10. The revelation of the additional evidence kept by the girl's mother triggered a new wave of investigations that shook the entire business structure of the metropolis. The detailed report she had preserved during months of persecution exposed a network of corruption that extended far beyond Mr. Beaumont's company, involving fraudulent municipal contracts, manipulated bids, and a complex money laundering system that had operated in the city for more than a decade. During the weeks that followed, the Millionaire's office became an operations center for investigators, auditors, and prosecutors who worked tirelessly to dismantle the entire criminal organization. His stock investments, which had been partially compromised by the fraudulent scheme, began to recover as confidence in the financial markets was restored. The assets he had accumulated over years of honest work were finally safe from the manipulations of his corrupt half-brother. The girl observed all this movement with her characteristic curiosity, creating drawings that documented the complex emotions of the adults around her. Her portraits of the investigators showed determined men and women working with piles of papers and serious expressions. Even more touching were her illustrations of her mother, which began to show a woman gradually recovering color in her face and light in her eyes as her mental health improved. "My mum is getting less grey," she commented one afternoon, showing the millionaire a drawing where she had used more vibrant colors to portray the woman. "Before she was all grey like rain clouds, but now she has some yellow like the sun." The child's artistic observation perfectly captured the transformation that everyone had noticed in the mother during the last weeks. With the relief of knowing that her daughter was safe and that the criminals who had persecuted them were being punished, she had begun to respond positively to psychological treatment. The doctors were talking about hospital discharge in the near future, a possibility that brought joy and anxiety in equal measure. During one of the weekly visits to the clinic, the girl's mother made a proposal that surprised both the millionaire and his daughter. Instead of claiming full custody of the child, she suggested a co-parenting arrangement that would recognize the genuine bond that had developed between the businessman and the girl during the months of living together. "You saved my daughter when I couldn't protect her," she said with sincere gratitude, addressing the millionaire during a private conversation. "You gave her stability, love, and security that I couldn't provide. It would be selfish of me to ignore what you have built together." "She is your daughter," replied the businessman, fighting his own emotions. "You have priority right over her." "Legal right, yes," the mother agreed, "but emotional right, that she has earned. I look at you two together and I see a genuine connection that goes beyond legal obligations. It would be cruel to separate you now." The proposal she presented was revolutionary in its simplicity and generosity. The girl would continue living mainly in the mansion with the millionaire, but would spend weekends and holidays with her biological mother as she settled into a new life. Both adults would share important decisions about the child's education, health, and future, creating an expanded family based on mutual love and respect. "What do you think?" the businessman asked the girl after carefully explaining the proposal. "Would you like to have two homes where you are loved?" Her answer demonstrated once again her extraordinary wisdom. "It's like having two different gardens to take care of. I can plant different flowers in each one, but they will all grow beautiful because they receive love." During this period of delicate negotiations about custody and family arrangements, a new threat emerged from a completely unexpected direction. Distant relatives of the imprisoned half-brother, discovering the extent of the evidence that the girl's mother had preserved, began to make direct threats against the newly formed family. These individuals, some with their own criminal connections, realized that the continued testimony of the two women could expose their own participations in the corruption scheme. "We have received information about possible attempts at intimidation," explained the head of security during an emergency meeting at the mansion. "There are people who may try to silence the witnesses before more evidence is revealed." The possibility that the girl and her mother could be targets of criminal retaliation forced the millionaire to take even more stringent protection measures. Armed guards were discreetly positioned around the property, surveillance systems were updated, and an emergency evacuation plan was developed in case the situation deteriorated. During a particularly tense night, when rumors about a possible invasion of the mansion circulated among security agents, The girl once again demonstrated her extraordinary courage. Instead of hiding in her room, as any normal child would do, she approached the millionaire in his office and offered him a drawing she had created especially for that moment. The illustration showed a fortress surrounded by bad people, but inside the walls was a united family, protected by warrior angels who shone with golden light. In the center of the image, a little girl held the hands of two adults, a tall man and a gentle woman, all smiling despite the darkness around them. "No matter how many bad people come," she said with a determination that made his heart ache, "our family is stronger because it is made of true love." Her words echoed a wisdom that transcended her apparent age, reminding the businessman that they had faced terrible challenges together and emerged stronger with each obstacle overcome. The child he had found on the streets, traumatized and abandoned, had transformed into a source of strength and inspiration that helped him face even the most dangerous threats. The next morning, news arrived that completely changed the dynamics of the situation. During an operation coordinated by the authorities, several of the relatives who had made threats were preventively arrested, accused of intimidating witnesses and participating in the original corruption scheme. The evidence collected during the arrests revealed specific plans to kidnap the girl as a way to pressure her mother to retract her testimony. "The criminal network has been completely dismantled," explained the lead investigator during a meeting to update the millionaire on the developments. "There are no more credible threats against your family. The main figures are in jail, and the evidence is so solid that there is no possibility of successful appeals." The relief that took over the mansion was palpable. For the first time in months, the businessman could contemplate a future where the safety of his family was not constantly threatened. His businesses, which had suffered during the period of investigations and instability, began to recover as the confidence of customers and investors returned. During an impromptu celebration that night, with the housekeeper preparing a special dinner and the girl's mother receiving special permission to leave the clinic for a few hours, the extended family could finally reunite in peace. The girl circulated among the adults who loved her, distributing drawings of flowers and birds that symbolized her joy at the end of the threats. "Now we can plan our future together," said Mr. Beaumont, raising a symbolic toast with fruit juice that the girl had insisted on preparing herself. "As a true family, united by love and protected by truth." The girl's mother smiled through tears of happiness, holding her daughter's hand while looking with gratitude at the man who had saved the child when she couldn't do it. The housekeeper, who had witnessed the entire journey from the first difficult days, wiped her eyes discreetly, moved to see the house finally full of genuine joy after so much suffering. Chapter 11. 3 months after the complete dismantling of the criminal network, life in the mansion had found a peaceful rhythm that none of the residents had experienced in a long time. The girl's mother had been discharged from the clinic and was living in a comfortable apartment near the property, discreetly financed by the millionaire as part of the co-parenting agreement they had established. Weekends became special moments where the extended family gathered for simple activities that brought genuine joy to everyone. Mr. Beaumont's company had not only fully recovered from the fraud perpetrated by his half-brother, but had grown significantly as new investors, impressed with his integrity during the crisis, decided to invest their resources in his businesses. His investments in Wall Street stocks reached new heights, his holdings in gold provided additional stability, and even his modest reserves in cryptocurrencies had appreciated substantially, increasing his net worth in ways that would benefit several future generations. Maisie, now fully 5 years old, but still appearing to be 3 due to her unique condition, had blossomed in ways that constantly surprised the adults around her. Her extraordinary photographic memory was being channeled into educational activities under the guidance of specialized tutors Mr. Beaumont had hired. She learned languages with astonishing ease, absorbed complex mathematical concepts as if they were games, and created works of art that impressed even professional critics. During this period of apparent stability, an unexpected discovery brought a new dimension to the family's story. While organizing old documents in the study, the housekeeper found a sealed letter that had been delivered years ago, but never opened due to the chaotic period following the family tragedy. The correspondence was from a law office specializing in genealogy, containing information about the family tree that had been requested by Mr. Beaumont's father shortly before his passing. "This letter arrived almost 2 years ago," the housekeeper explained, handing over the envelope with reverence. "With everything that happened, it ended up forgotten among other papers." The letter's contents revealed surprising information about the family history that no one had suspected. The millionaire's father had conducted a discreet investigation into all his descendants, including children not officially recognized. The document confirmed the existence of the corrupt half-brother, but also revealed another relative no one knew about, a younger sister who had been given up for adoption decades ago. "Your sister is registered as having married an accountant," Mr. Beaumont read aloud, carefully studying the genealogical information. "And had a daughter in—" He stopped abruptly, feeling the blood run cold in his veins, as the date of birth and other details aligned perfectly with what he knew about Maisie. The revelation that the child he had saved and learned to love as a daughter was, in fact, his biological niece hit the entire family like a bolt from the blue. The girl's mother, confronted with the genealogical documentation, confirmed that she had never known her father, having been raised by distant relatives after being abandoned as a baby. The family connection explained many things: the child's extraordinary intelligence, her natural artistic abilities, and even her ability to form deep emotional bonds despite the traumas she had experienced. "Does this mean we've always been a real family?" Maisie asked, when the situation was explained to her in a way appropriate for her age. "Not just a family of the heart, but a blood family too." "It means exactly that," Mr. Beaumont replied, embracing her with an emotion that transcended any feeling he had experienced before. "Fate brought us together in a way none of us could have imagined." The discovery of the family connection completely transformed the legal dynamics of the entire situation. Instead of a complex co-parenting arrangement between strangers, it was now a genuine family that had been reunited by extraordinary circumstances. The formal adoption process was significantly simplified, with Mr. Beaumont officially assuming responsibility for his niece while maintaining the biological mother's rights respected and protected. During this period of revelations and legal adjustments, Maisie once again demonstrated her extraordinary ability to process complex situations with wisdom beyond her years. She created a series of drawings that documented her understanding of the new family reality, including an artistically elaborate family tree, where she positioned herself as the center connecting various branches of a family that had been separated by decades of secrets and tragedies. "Now I understand why I've always felt at home here," she said one afternoon, while working in her special garden that had transformed into a small paradise of colorful flowers and vegetables she cultivated with dedication. "My heart knew this was my place, even before my head figured it out." The housekeeper, who had witnessed 3 generations of the family go through joys and sorrows, found a special meaning in the revelation. "This house has always been blessed," she commented during a conversation with the girl's mother, "but now I feel it has finally found its true purpose." As the family adapted to the new reality, Mr. Beaumont's businesses continued to prosper in ways that exceeded his most optimistic expectations. Important contracts were signed, strategic partnerships were established, and his reputation for integrity attracted investment opportunities that exponentially multiplied his financial assets. He had become not only a successful businessman, but an example of how to overcome adversity by maintaining unquestionable ethical values. The girl's mother, inspired by the recovery of her own life and the stability she had finally found, decided to resume her career as an accountant, but this time working for organizations that helped families in vulnerable situations. Her personal experience with trauma and recovery had made her especially qualified to identify and prevent the types of exploitations she herself had suffered. "I want to use what I've learned to protect other families," she explained during a meeting where they discussed her future plans. "No one should go through what we went through, and if I can help prevent that, then all our suffering will have been worth it." During a particularly serene night, when the family was gathered in the garden, observing the stars that shone over the mansion, Maisie made an observation that perfectly summarized the extraordinary journey they had all shared. "Before I thought people were like flowers that needed a garden to grow," she said, pointing to her favorite plants that flourished under her careful attention. "But now I know that sometimes people are seeds that fly in the wind until they find the right soil, where they can take deep roots." Her words deeply touched all the adults present, who recognized in the simple metaphor a profound truth about how their lives had intertwined in ways that seemed impossible but now revealed themselves as inevitable. The tragedy that had begun their journey had transformed into a blessing. Suffering had given way to joy, and a family that had been destroyed by greed and revenge had been rebuilt through love and forgiveness. However, even in that moment of apparent peace, one last surprise awaited the family. During the final procedures to formalize the adoption and regularize the entire legal situation, the lawyers discovered a clause in Mr. Beaumont's father's will that had remained secret until that moment. The discovery of this final provision would once again change the fate of everyone involved in a way that no one could have foreseen. Chapter 12. The secret clause discovered in Mr. Beaumont's father's will revealed an extraordinary provision that had remained dormant for decades, awaiting the right moment to be activated. The document stipulated that if any direct or collateral descendant of the family was found in a situation of extreme vulnerability, a special foundation would be automatically created with a significant portion of the family's assets to ensure protection and educational opportunities for that person and their lineage. "Your father had foreseen situations like this," explained the lead attorney during a solemn meeting in the family study. "He stipulated that if any family member was discovered living in precarious conditions, a substantial amount would be automatically allocated for their protection and development. In Maisie's case, this means approximately 20 million in funds that will become available when she reaches adulthood." The revelation left everyone present silent for several minutes. Mr. Beaumont understood that his father, even with all his faults and secrets, had tried to create a safety net to protect descendants who might have been left helpless by their own past decisions. The irony was that the same fortune that had generated envy and corruption in his half-brother would now serve to protect and educate the child who had suffered so much due to that same greed. "This means that regardless of what happens to me, she will always be financially protected," the businessman murmured, processing the implications of the discovery. "She will be able to study at the best universities, have access to specialized medical treatments for her condition, and never need to depend on anyone's generosity." The girl's mother received the news with a mixture of relief and apprehension. For years, she had lived with the constant fear that her daughter might once again face deprivation if something happened to her. Now, she discovered that the child not only had a loving family, but also guaranteed financial security for life. "It's as if the universe is trying to compensate for all the suffering she went through," she commented during a private conversation with the millionaire. After having lost everything, she gained a family, security, and now a guaranteed future. Maisie, when informed about the inheritance in a way appropriate for her age, demonstrated her characteristic wisdom by asking, "Does this mean I can help other children who are sad like I was?" Her first concern was not with the personal benefits, but with the possibility of using the resources to alleviate the suffering of other people in similar situations. During the following months, while the legal details of the foundation were finalized, the family's life continued to evolve in positive and surprising ways. Mr. Beaumont's company had become a model of business ethics, attracting prestigious contracts and international partnerships that significantly expanded its operations. His investments in socially responsible companies not only generated substantial profits, but also contributed to causes he had learned to value through his experience with the girl. The child had begun attending a special school for children with exceptional abilities, where her photographic memory and extraordinary intelligence were channeled into innovative educational projects. She excelled in all subjects, but demonstrated a special passion for art and natural sciences, fields where her ability to observe details became a significant advantage. "She is creating a project on environmental conservation," explained her main teacher during a meeting with the parents. "Her botanical illustrations are so precise that we could use them in scientific publications. It's extraordinary to see such a young child demonstrate such a depth of understanding about complex ecosystems." During this period of academic and personal growth, the girl maintained her routine of caring for the mansion's garden, which had transformed into a natural laboratory where she experimented with cultivation techniques and studied the behaviors of insects and birds. Her special space had become a refuge where she processed the constant changes in her life and found peace through connection with nature. The housekeeper, now officially retired but choosing to remain in the mansion as a member of the family, had become Maisie's special confidant, someone with whom she shared her deepest thoughts about identity, family, and purpose. "She asked me things that many adults never stop to consider," the elderly woman commented, as if her experience of almost losing everything had made her wiser about what really matters in life. During one of these conversations, the girl expressed a desire that deeply touched the heart of the entire family. "I want to find other children who are lost like I was," she said, with a determination that was impressive for her maturity. "And I want to help them find good families like ours." This statement planted a seed that would grow to become the most important project of Mr. Beaumont's life. He began researching ways to create a systematic program to identify and help children in vulnerable situations, using part of his fortune and the foundation established by his father to create a protection network that could save dozens of lives. "If we're going to do this, let's do it right," he said during a meeting with child welfare experts. "I want to create something that can identify children at risk before they have to go through what our girl went through." The project that began to take shape was ambitious and revolutionary. It would combine advanced technology to identify patterns of childhood vulnerability with a human network of trained professionals to intervene quickly and effectively. The girl's mother, with her experience in accounting and her personal understanding of the systems that had failed to protect her own daughter, became a fundamental consultant to ensure that resources were used responsibly and efficiently. During this period of intensive planning, the girl continued creating drawings that documented her vision of the project. Her illustrations showed children being rescued from dangerous situations and taken to loving homes, families being reunited after traumatic separations, and entire communities working together to protect their most vulnerable members. She sees the project as a natural extension of her own experience, observed the psychologist who accompanied her development. For her, Helping other children is not charity, but a responsibility that comes from having been saved. It's an extraordinarily mature perspective for someone her age. The first phase of the program was launched discreetly in 3 neighborhoods of the metropolis, where statistics indicated a higher concentration of children at risk. Specialized teams, funded by the foundation and trained according to protocols developed by the family's experience, began working to identify and protect children who might be facing situations similar to what the girl had experienced. The initial results were encouraging. In just 2 months, 17 children were identified and removed from abusive situations. 12 families received necessary support to overcome temporary crises, and 3 local networks of child exploitation were exposed and dismantled. Each child saved represented a personal victory for the girl, who followed the progress through reports adapted to her understanding. "This is the best use we could give to our fortune," said Mr. Beaumont during an assessment of the first results. "Each child we save honors the memory of what our girl went through and transforms her pain into purpose." During a special night, when the family gathered to celebrate the first anniversary of the girl's rescue from the bridge, she made an observation that perfectly summarized the transformation everyone had experienced. "Before I thought I had been saved," she said, looking at the stars that shone over the garden that had become her sanctuary. "But now I know that we all saved each other." Chapter 13. 2 years after the launch of the Child Protection Program, an unexpected discovery brought a completely new dimension to the family's mission. During a routine operation to rescue children on the streets in an industrial area of the metropolis, social workers found evidence of an organization far more sophisticated and dangerous than anything they had faced before. It was not just family neglect or poverty, but an organized system that deliberately kept children in vulnerable conditions for economic exploitation. "We found documents that suggest a coordinated network," explained the program coordinator during an emergency meeting at the mansion. "Someone is systematically identifying families in crisis and offering help that actually puts children in even worse situations. It's as if they are deliberately creating the conditions that our program was created to combat." The revelation deeply disturbed Mr. Beaumont, who had invested not only his fortune but his personal passion in the project. His investments in ethical companies had generated substantial resources to expand the program, and discovering that there were forces actively working against his efforts awakened a fierce determination he had not felt since the days of confrontation with his corrupt half-brother. Maisie, now 7 years old, but still appearing to be 5 due to her special condition, had followed the development of the program with intellectual interest that impressed all the adults around her. When informed about the discovery of the organized network, she reacted with a maturity that reflected her unique experience of having been both a victim and a witness to different types of exploitation. "The bad people always try to spoil the good things," she observed during a conversation with her mother in the special garden that had become her nature observation lab. "But if we know they exist, we can be smarter and better protect the children who need help." Her ability to process complex information and propose practical solutions had continued to develop in an extraordinary way. The specialized tutors that Mr. Beaumont had hired for her education reported that she demonstrated an understanding of social systems and power dynamics that would be advanced even for college students. During the following months, the program was restructured to operate with greater discretion and security. Private investigators were hired to map the extent of the criminal network. Security protocols were implemented to protect both professionals and rescued children, and strategic partnerships were established with legal authorities who had experience in combating sophisticated organizations. The girl's mother, who had become a recognized expert in identifying financial patterns that indicated systematic exploitation, discovered alarming connections between the criminal network and some of the same institutions that had been corrupted by the half-brothers' scheme years ago. "It's like they're hydras," she explained during a detailed presentation of her findings. "We cut off one head, but others grow in different places." During this period of intensive investigation, Maisie began to show signs of anxiety that worried all the adults responsible for her well-being. Her drawings, which traditionally depicted colorful flowers and optimistic scenes, began to include darker elements that reflected her growing understanding that the world contained persistent threats against vulnerable children like she had been. "She's processing the fact that her experience wasn't unique," the specialized psychologist explained during a consultation. "For a child with her intelligence and extraordinary memory, realizing that there are other children suffering in similar ways can be emotionally overwhelming." Mr. Beaumont made the decision to be completely honest with Maisie about the extent of the problems they were facing, but also about the successes they had achieved. He showed her adapted reports that documented the hundreds of children who had already been helped, the families that had been reunited, and the positive changes that their program had created in entire communities. "The important thing isn't that bad people exist," he said during one of their special conversations in the garden. "The important thing is that good people like you choose to do something to help." Maisie's response revealed a determination that surprised even those who already knew her extraordinary personality. "Then let's do more," she said simply. "If there are many children needing help, we need a bigger and better program." Inspired by the child's unwavering determination, the businessman made the most ambitious decision of his career. He would liquidate a significant portion of his gold investments and diversified holdings to create a permanent fund that would expand the program to a national scale. His fortune, built through decades of work in construction and careful investments, would be transformed into the largest private child protection program in the country. "If we're going to do this, let's do it in a way that endures beyond our lives," he declared during a meeting with financial consultants and experts in non-governmental organizations. "I want to create something that continues protecting children even when we're no longer here." During the preparations for this massive expansion, an unexpected discovery brought renewed hope to the entire family. Investigations into the criminal network revealed that many of the children who had been exploited had family members who were desperately looking for them, but who had been deliberately kept separated through false information and corrupt bureaucracies. "There are dozens of cases where parents and children were separated by lies," the lead investigator explained. The network not only exploited children, but also profited by keeping families separated and desperate. This discovery led to the creation of a new component of the program, a specialized family reunification division that would use the same technology and resources to reconnect families that had been separated by criminal circumstances. The girl's mother volunteered to lead this initiative, using her own experience of separation and reunion to help other families overcome similar traumas. During the first year of national operation, the expanded program achieved results that exceeded all expectations. More than 500 children were removed from dangerous situations, 120 families were reunited, and 15 regional criminal networks were exposed and dismantled. Each success was celebrated by Maisie as a personal victory, and she maintained a special mural in her room where she posted photographs and drawings representing each child who had been helped. She sees each child saved as a version of herself who was protected in time, observed the housekeeper, who had become the unofficial chronicler of the family's transformation. It's as if she's healing her own past through the present of other children. During a special night, when representatives from all over the country came to the mansion for a conference on international expansion of the program, Maisie was invited to present her own ideas on how to further improve the services. Her presentation, created entirely by her using her characteristic drawings and simple but profound explanations, impressed experienced professionals who rarely saw such innovative perspectives on child protection. "Children know what other children need," she said to the audience of adults who listened to her with respectful attention. "You should always ask us what would be best, because we remember what it's like to be afraid and what it's like to feel alone." Her suggestion to create advisory councils composed of children who had been helped by the program was implemented immediately, revolutionizing the way services were planned and executed. The unique perspective of the program's own beneficiaries brought improvements that no adult had considered, making the services more effective and sensitive to the real needs of vulnerable children. At the end of that transformative year, when the family gathered for their annual celebration of the rescue on the bridge, Maisie made a reflection that perfectly captured the extraordinary journey they had all shared. "Before I was a lost girl who needed help," she said, observing the flowering garden that had become a symbol of her own transformation. "Now I'm part of a family that helps lost girls and boys find their way back home." Chapter 14. 5 years after that fateful night on the bridge, the mansion that had once been a mausoleum of painful memories had transformed into the center of a silent revolution that changed lives throughout the country. Maisie, now 9 years old but still maintaining her delicate appearance that made her look younger, had become not only the emotional heart of the family, but also the inspiration behind the largest private child protection program in national history. On that special spring morning, as the gardens bloomed with vibrant colors that reflected the complete transformation the property had undergone, an extraordinary ceremony was being prepared. The program had been officially recognized by the government as a national model of excellence, and dignitaries from various regions of the country came to grace the event that would celebrate the milestone of 1,000 children rescued and 500 families reunited. Mr. Beaumont, now recognized internationally as a pioneer in strategic philanthropy, watched the final preparations with a mixture of pride and humility that had become his trademark. His fortune, which had once seemed a heavy burden after the tragedy that had claimed his first family, had found purpose through the child he had saved, and who, in turn, had saved him from a darkness that could have consumed him forever. "I never imagined that an impulsive decision on a bridge could lead to all this," he commented to the housekeeper, who now oversaw a team of assistants responsible for coordinating the foundation's growing activities. "Sometimes I wonder if I really saved her, or if she saved me." "You saved each other," replied the wise woman, observing through the window as the girl patiently explained to a group of visiting children how to properly care for flower seedlings. "And in the process, you saved hundreds of other families too." The girl's mother, who had become one of the most respected experts in the country on family reunification, arrived from the capital that morning, bringing news that represented the final triumph over the forces that had once threatened to destroy their lives. The last member of the criminal network that had exploited vulnerable children had been convicted, and the organizations that systematically separated families for profit had been completely dismantled. "It's over," she said with tears of relief in her eyes, embracing the daughter who had become a symbol of hope for thousands of children in similar situations. "There are no more organized networks operating. The children we help now face normal challenges, not criminal conspiracies." During the official ceremony, which took place in the transformed gardens of the mansion, Maisie was invited to plant a special tree that would symbolize the continued growth of the program and its expansion to other countries. Her movements were careful and deliberate, reflecting the extraordinary maturity she had developed through experiences that shaped her unique perspective on justice, compassion, and social responsibility. "This tree will grow along with all the children we will continue to help," she said to the audience of hundreds of people who had traveled to witness the historic moment. "And one day, when I'm an adult, I'll bring my own family here to show them where it all began." Her words, broadcast live to the entire country, deeply touched millions of viewers who were following the ceremony. The girl's story had become a national legend, inspiring countless people to contribute to causes related to child protection and family reunification. Books were written about her journey, documentaries were produced, and universities created study programs based on the models that her experience had helped to develop. During the special luncheon that followed the ceremony, an exciting surprise awaited the family. The President of the United States had sent a special delegation to announce that the program would be officially adopted as a national public policy, with guaranteed government funding for permanent expansion. The private initiative had grown so much and demonstrated so much effectiveness that it had become a model for legislation that would protect future generations of children. "You have transformed a personal tragedy into a national blessing," declared the presidential representative during his official speech. "The courage of a child and the determination of a family have changed the way our country protects its most vulnerable citizens." While the official speeches continued, Maisie quietly slipped away to her special garden, where she found a moment of quiet to process the magnitude of what had been achieved. Her most recent drawings, displayed in a special gallery inside the mansion, documented not only her own journey, but the stories of hundreds of other children who had found hope through the program that her experience had inspired. Mr. Beaumont found her a few minutes later, sitting under the tree she had planted years ago and which now offered generous shade over her flower bed of favorite plants. They remained in comfortable silence for a few moments, watching butterflies dance among the plants she had cared for with dedication since arriving at the mansion as a traumatized and abandoned child. "Do you regret anything?" he asked, curious about the deep thoughts that always occupied the girl's extraordinary mind. "I regret that it took me so long to learn that bad people can't destroy good people if the good people work together," she replied, with the wisdom that had become her trademark. "But I don't regret anything that brought us here because everything served to help other children." Her words perfectly summarized the spiritual transformation that the entire family had experienced. Pain had been alchemized into purpose, tragedy had been converted into triumph, and individual suffering had become the source of collective healing for thousands of people they would never meet personally, but whose lives had been touched by the courage of a child who had refused to allow her own pain to be wasted. As the sun began to set over the mansion that special night, the family gathered one last time in the gardens for a private celebration that marked not the end of their journey, but the beginning of a legacy that would continue growing for generations. The girl had created a special drawing for the occasion, showing a golden bridge that connected the dark past to the bright future, with hundreds of small figures crossing safely from one side to the other. "The bridge where we met wasn't the end of our stories," she said, handing the drawing to Mr. Beaumont as a special gift. "It was the beginning of all the stories we're still going to write together." In that perfect moment, as the stars began to shine over a family that had been forged through tragedy but consolidated through unconditional love, everyone understood that they had witnessed something rare and precious, the complete transformation of broken lives into stories of hope that would inspire the world for decades to come. The girl, who once drew birds trapped in cages, now created illustrations of children flying free through infinite skies, carried by winds of possibility that she herself had helped to create. Her journey from the streets to the mansion, from hopelessness to purpose, from isolation to family, had become more than a story of personal salvation. It had become a beacon of light that would guide countless other lost souls back home. And as the night gently embraced the property where so many miracles had happened, a simple but profound truth crystallized in the hearts of all those present. Sometimes saving a single life can change the entire world, one child at a time, one family at a time, one story of hope at a time. And if you liked this wonderful story, please comment, giving a score from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important, and if you love beautiful stories, subscribe to my channel. I promise to make your day better with my videos.